Very warm welcome.
Because
Good evening, everyone. Very warm welcome to you from St. Francis Retreat Center here at Mepkin Abbey, Moncks Corners, South Carolina. We're delighted to invite you to this episode of Mepkin Abbey's Forum for Contemplative Ecology. And it's a wonderful way to begin the new year by listening to the wonderful work that Sister Jeanne Clark is doing. And Sister Jeanne, thank you for bringing your own cheerleaders with you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sam and let him introduce you, and we'll begin.
Thank you, Father Garrick, and so great to see so many smiling faces from very different corners of life. It's a blessing to be with you here and to begin our first Mepkin Abbey Forum for Contemplative Ecology of the new year. It is such a delight to see the way that this community has continued to germinate over the last several months. And I can't think of a more fitting and amazingly inspiring guest to have with us this evening than Sister Jeanne Clark, who has been a real inspiration for me since I came across her work these past few years, connected with her through the Deep Time Network and through reading her wonderful memoir, All the Way In, which was published in 2023 from Orbis Books. So by way of introduction, Sister Jeanne Clark is a sister of St. Dominic from Amityville, New York, and is the founder of Homecoming, an organization committed to the understanding that the human and natural worlds are one sacred community of life. Jeanne is an educator who was instrumental in the creation of Homecoming Farm, a community-supported agricultural project, or CSA, which helped humans to heal through the nurturance of soil and seed, producing fruits and vegetables without the use of chemicals. Jeanne has also offered programs for children and adults in understanding themselves as part of Earth and as intricately connected to the land they call home. Jeanne has been a teacher for over 50 years, has been a campus minister, a pastoral associate in parishes, and a longtime activist in both anti-nuclear, anti-war, and environmental causes. She attributes her coming home to the land to the Salvadoran people whom she accompanied to El Salvador during the war there in the 1980s. In 2005, Jeanne was awarded the Peacemaker of the Year award by Pax Christi, Long Island. At the age of 85, Jeanne wrote her first book, All the Way In, published by Orbis Press in 2023. The book won a gold medal award from Nautilus Book Awards and first place for memoir from the Catholic Media Association. Jeanne, thank you so much for being with us here this evening.
Oh, thank you, Sam. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here. As I was saying before, I've been participating in these programs here at this Abbey since for many months, and the wisdom of the people that Sam has invited has really expanded my whole understanding. So I hope tonight that I can give some perspective on my story. And I'm hoping too that you will connect to your story, because everyone here tonight has a story. And all of our stories are connected to the big story, the story of the universe. We each have different gifts. So as you know, I'm a Dominican sister, and the motto of the Dominican order is to contemplate and give to others the fruit of your contemplation. And I've been a Dominican sister for over 60 years now. And so contemplation has been a big part of my life. If you look up contemplation in the, well, it used to say the dictionary, but now people Google everything. So if you Google contemplation, you will get a definition. And the definition that they give is a direct awareness, a deep reflective thought, or the act of looking thoughtfully at something for a long time. The act of looking thoughtfully at something for a long time. I do remember a great theologian who identified contemplation that way too. He said that contemplation was a long, loving look at reality. And so I'd like to open tonight with a contemplative meditation. Most times when we think of contemplative, we might think of beauty and awe and a feeling of great peace. But if contemplation really is a deep look, a long, loving look at reality, I believe that contemplation also is relating to looking and contemplating ugly things, perhaps even evil things. And that's been something that I have done in my life. Looking at sometimes the things we really don't want to look at, and that we wouldn't ever think of looking at them for a long time. So, but tonight I'd like to open my kind of reflections with a meditation. It really was a meditation done by Jim Douglas, who lives on the West Coast near Seattle. And it's a meditation on the Trident submarine. Perhaps many of you may not have even heard of the Trident submarine, but I discovered the Trident submarine many years ago, and this is the meditation. So I'd like you to be with me in this meditation. What is Trident? Trident is the end of the world. Trident is a nuclear submarine which, with Trident II missiles, is able to destroy 192 cities or areas at one time, each with a blast 38 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. Trident is 7,296 Hiroshimas. One Trident submarine can destroy any country on Earth. The fleet of Trident submarines, 18 in the United States and 4 in the United Kingdom, can end life on Earth. I don't understand. Good, we're getting somewhere. What is it you don't understand? A submarine, which equals 7,296 Hiroshimas. How can anyone understand that? Begin with a meditation. To understand Trident, say the word Hiroshima and reflect on its meaning for 1 second. Say and understand Hiroshima again, and again, and again, 7,296 times. Assuming you're able to understand Hiroshima in 1 second, you'll need more than 2 hours to understand Trident. And that's one Trident submarine. To understand the destructive power of the entire Trident fleet, it would take you more than 16 hours, devoting 1 second to each Hiroshima. Your meditation is impossible. To understand Hiroshima alone would take a lifetime. You do understand Hiroshima was the end of our ability to imagine our destructive power or to measure its consequences. Trident is the end of the world. How does one live at the end of the world? By beginning a new one. Stop Trident and open up a new world. You've lost me again. Stopping Trident doesn't sound like beginning a new world, not a very feasible goal. I think you need therapy. You need to adjust to a world that is a long way from stopping Trident. What we all need is not therapy, but the vision of Gandhi and Jesus before him, who show the way to turn an end of the world into the beginning of a new one. You mean the power of nonviolent resistance and loving one's enemies? Yes. What about the power of the Trident? The power of Trident comes from the grip of an illusion, our own ego, and the murderous security they seek. The force of truth and love lived in their depths is a force of unity, of life itself. That force is real. We need to test the truth of love by betting our lives on it in the world. If a community can experiment deeply enough in a nonviolent love force, Trident will be stopped. Love will stop Trident.
Thank you, Jeanne, for that very arresting and powerful contemplative practice, and for reminding us to bear witness to the grotesque and the destructive as much as we bear witness to that which is beautiful in our world. And so as we dive into our conversation this evening, I thought we would really turn back into your early life and get more of a glimpse into how you became oriented on this path of peace activism. And particularly, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your spiritual formation and how you found the vision and the wherewithal to begin advocating for peace in such a courageous way.
Well, I think it begins actually with my Catholic education, from grammar school through high school and college, where I learned a lot about Jesus. And it's not so much preached in the church very much, but Jesus was nonviolent. He rejected violence. And the early church also rejected violence. And so that was always my understanding of Jesus, who taught me to love my enemies. And so I do believe that my Catholic education and my home life, which was a Catholic home where Jesus was believed in also. That was the beginning of my journey into nonviolence. But I would say that there were great mentors of mine as I grew in my understanding of nonviolence and peace. Martin Luther King, of course, was a key person who taught me about the beloved community where everyone belonged. Everyone. Even my enemies. Even the people I don't like. Even the ones who are so different from me. And I believed now that Martin also would include the animals and the creatures and the birds in the beloved community. I mean, that's what I teach now to the children, that the worms and the bees are a big part of our community. We're one big community of nature and humans, and expanding that beloved community. So the beloved community of Martin Luther King just articulated what Jesus's vision was. Jesus never came to found a church. He came to bring this message, this movement, this way of living. And many of his early disciples were jailed. I reminded my community of that when I was jailed. And some didn't understand how I could be, and even my father, who was a New York City detective, but beginning to understand, yes, the early disciples went to jail for what they believed, and how it's not so much what they believed, but how they acted out of that belief. So these mentors of mine, so many, a key person in my ability to risk was Franz Jagerstetter, who has just recently become a saint of the Catholic Church. And he was an Austrian peasant in the time of Hitler who refused to join Hitler's army. And everyone told him that he shouldn't do that. He was a father, he should be responsible to his children. His bishop told him that, his wife was counseling that. There's a book written about his life, it's called In Solitary Witness, because he witnessed this alone. And he went to jail and was finally beheaded. And when the chaplain in the jail asked him why he continued to do what he did, he told a story, which it was a big story in my life that really brought me to do what many of the things I did. And that story was that the thing that kept him going was a dream that he had had. And it was a dream about a white train. And everyone in the country was boarding the train. And he boarded too in his dream. And then he heard people screaming on the train. And he said, why are people screaming? And the person next to him in the dream said, don't you know where this train is going? This train is going to hell. And he got up from his seat. He ran to the door to get off the train. I heard that story when I went to Berea, Kentucky, to hear the poetry of Dan Berrigan. And I think that when I got there, what I really didn't hear was Dan's poetry. What I heard was this story. It touched me so deeply. And I said to the sister I was with when we were driving back to Tennessee, we're on that train. That train is the nuclear arms race. We've got to get off. But then I thought to myself, well, why would I get off if everyone's on the train? The only way the reason I'd get off is to get in front of it, to stop it. At that time, I didn't know there was really a white train in the United States that was carrying nuclear weapons. I didn't know about, no one knew about it in the United States at that time. So that story and Franz Jagerstätter's life was such a witness to me, and it touched me on such a deep level that he really led me to Ground Zero on the West Coast, where the Trident submarine, the first one, was coming in 1983, I think it was, in the USS Ohio. And I drove across the country from New York to the Kitsap Peninsula, which is just about 16 miles across the Puget Sound from Seattle. I drove there not knowing anyone there, but I knew there was a community that was going to say no to that Trident submarine. So that's, I have never forgotten that story. It's more than a story, because there's an unseen world that we're not aware of that's influencing us if we're open to it. And all these ancestors of ours, so that Martin Luther King, Franz Jagerstätter, sometimes I know a lot of where I am when I write poetry. So I'd just like to read you a poem I wrote a while ago. In gratitude to these ancestors of mine who have enriched my life and made me, in a sense, who I am, and have given me courage and truth. I wrote this poem in memory of and gratitude to Franz Jagerstätter, Oscar Romero, the Archbishop of El Salvador, who was assassinated, Jean Donovan, Ida Ford, Maura Clark, and Dorothy Cazell, the women who were murdered in El Salvador. You gave your life in love. Sacrifice embedded into wholeness became food for me, energy for action. You gave your life, and sight was given me, an opening to find my way back home. I celebrate your life and your self-giving, a reason for rejoicing and for hope. The story carries on, expanding to include all the acts of courage and of bravery, acts of solidarity. The sun who gives its life and energy away to nourish soil and seed and all of life on this beloved planet burns on, and so do I. You see, it's the relationship we have with our ancestors, with the brave ones, but they're very human also. They're not perfect people. But we have all these folks. In my life, these are the people who have helped me to be nonviolent and to do things that others see as courageous, but it's really not so much, I think, courageous as just living the truth, living this vision of Martin and Jesus, Gandhi, the women martyrs of El Salvador, the wonderful bishop, Archbishop Oscar Romero, who said, "I know they will kill me," he said, "but I will rise in the people of El Salvador." I visited the campus where the Jesuits were killed. 6 Jesuits were murdered by the military and laid out on the lawn. And I visited there after that slaughter. And when I went into one of the rooms where there was a picture of Archbishop Romero and the soldiers, and there was a bullet hole in the picture in his heart. And when I looked at that, I thought, they know that he was still alive. They thought they could shoot him again with a bullet because he was shot, saying mass that he was assassinated. And all of this was going on with the help of the funding of the United States of America. This is what opened my eyes to what my government was involved in, the murder of innocent people. So that's another thing of the Dominican order, is to study, to learn. To study is a big piece of the Dominican life. And I did a lot of study, not only in books. My room is filled with books, cases and cases. Jim is smiling because he's been in my room there when he visits from the West Coast. I have hundreds of books, but I learn from the books, but I also learn from the people. And it depends on where we're standing, but if we're close to the poor people, the truth will emerge. That's why Jesus hung around with the poor so much, I think. Because you find the truth there. So, I don't know, Sam, I could go on. I have many, many stories to tell about how my nonviolence, but it's not really mine. It belongs to everyone that I've been influenced by. And I'm so grateful that my life went in this direction. And a lot of it was the Catholic Church. At my trial, and I've been on trial many times, but Archbishop Hunthausen was a witness of mine to me. And that's what convinced my father that it was okay what I did, because a bishop of the church said it was okay. He was confused by my action, If you haven't read my book, or if you read it, the stories are all in there. My father was a New York City policeman, a New York City detective. And when he heard what I had done, my first act on Good Friday, I went to the Pentagon with a community of people, because it's at the Pentagon where all the plans are. And At the river entrance to the Pentagon, there are 2 posts, and on one of the posts, it says the Department of Defense. It used to be called the Department of War, which I think it should return to, because it's certainly not the Department of Defense. It's the department where war is planned. And I was with the Salvadoran people, and I knew that war was a war against the people. And so we went to the Pentagon on Good Friday, and I poured blood on that plaque while the community there chanted with me, "This is the blood of the poor. This is the blood of El Salvador. This is the blood of Christ." And so I got put into the Washington, D.C. jail. And when my father heard where I was, because he knew what that jail was like, he was horrified. And he said to my friend Margaret, "I think she's lost her mind." Looking back over it, I think he was right. I had lost one mind, and I had gotten another one, a different mind. The mind of Martin Luther King, Franz Jagestetter, the women from El Salvador, the people of El Salvador who taught me so much. That's why when I hear all the language about the immigrants now, because I know the people and I know why they're here. And they're not, criminals, and some might be, but most of the people are coming here for life, to save their children's lives, to save their own life. So this time of another poem, just to give you an idea of, because I always write poetry and it kind of always says where I am. This one I titled "Disturbing the Peace," because I've been charged with that several times, disturbing the peace. I used to say yes when I meant no, just to keep the peace. Disturbing things is such a messy business. You lose some friends, and those who once thought of you as polite and quite acceptable now view you as a troublemaker. Disturbing things is unacceptable as occupation. We cling to order and security, even if that order crushes in its top-heaviness, and our spirits sink so low. We try to bring them back to life by buying things. We try to keep the peace and say that everything's all right, even if our children are committing suicide. I'm happy to be disturber of the peace, although at times it's lonely and I yearn to feel more a part of things. It's frightening to disturb myself and stir within me things that were quite content to live with someone else's answers rather than my own integrity. To live the questions can get tiring sometimes. At times I shield myself and close my eyes and ears to those who would disturb my peace. Forgive me. Instead, I should give thanks for cries for help, for pictures of charred flesh of children burned by U.S. foreign policy. Ugliness revealed disturbs my peace, thank God. If only all of us could be disturbers of the peace, there'd be some hope for children and fragile things crushed within the present order. If we disturbed our peace, the earth would sing and air would become fresh again. Maybe in disturbing one another, we'd find a way to live together without grasping and without weapons. And our peace would be deserving of being undisturbed.
Beautiful. Thank you for your gift of poetry, Jeanne. And I think the creative word has a way of evoking this spirit you're bringing forth in ways that our normal speaking and prose can't ever fully approximate. And I love how you brought our attention, Jeanne, to the children and the well-being of our young people at this particular historical moment. And, I really do want to draw you out as well about your journey from peace activism into ecological activism, and not so much a departure, but a sort of marriage of this deep concern for social justice, for the rights of the poor, for peace, and bringing that into a concern for the entire earth as a sacred community. And I know in your book you credit your experience of rural people in El Salvador for helping you to belong to the land.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
I think this community would love to hear a little bit more about how did you enter into this ecological spirituality, and how have you worked to bring that sense of connectedness to young people?
Yeah. I think without knowing it, I was always there. For example, well, there's so much to say about it. When I was resisting the Trident submarine, and one thing that I did was because of the train, I found out there at that time that it really was a white train, that it existed in the country for years and years. No US citizen knew about it. It was carrying the weapons, transporting them, and nobody knew. And we discovered that train when I was there at Ground Zero resisting the Trident. We discovered the white train. I remember the day it happened when Jim Douglas called me. It was December 8th, I remember it. And he told me he was living in one house by the tracks, and he told me about this train that a reporter had told him about. He had taken a picture. He said, "Jim, did you ever see a white train?" He said, "No, but I've read the documents from the Navy that say if nuclear weapons were, there'd be a white train, that'll carry a white train." And so when I heard about that train, naturally, what came into my mind was Franz Jagerstedter's train and the dream. And so I knew from the minute that I heard about that train that I was going to be in front of it. Because I already had said to my friend, remember, when I lived in Tennessee, why would I get off the train except to get in front of it, to stop it? And so we didn't just, easily just jump in front of the train. We did a lot of training. We had a lot of knowledge about it. But I did one day go in front of that train, and I carried with me my Bible, a photo of a little baby named Daniel, who I was living with at the time. He was 4 months old, and a bouquet of daffodils, just to show why I was going in front of the train. My Bible, the Word of God, the children. Daniel represented the children, and the daffodils. You see, So without being conscious of it, I was already relating to the earth, to the flowers and the children, but I wasn't quite aware of it consciously. But when I was being arrested, the words that came to me, which I'd said to the officer, his name is, did you see the picture of the baby I said when he was arresting me? He said, yeah, he looked very sad. I thought maybe he was a young father. He said yes, and he looked sad. I didn't know I was going to say these words, but I said, his name is Daniel, and he's asking us to stop the train. What I was saying was the children in the future are asking us to stop the train. You know, the flowers are asking us to stop the train. The creatures are asking. I wasn't so aware of the new story at that time, but I did have some awareness of that was being expanded all the time. And then it's true, when I went to Salvador, the people brought me home to the land. That was a big revelation, because I was totally as most of us are in the United States, totally disconnected from the land, except for the farmers and people like that. I had no understanding of the land. Living on Long Island, just shopping centers everywhere, cement, you know. And that, the people of El Salvador brought me back to the land, because they are an indigenous people. And that's when I started Homecoming Farm and our mother house in Amityville, to connect to the land. See? And so again, that was not so much my idea as Salvadorans teaching me that the land was important. And then, of course, Genesis Farm with Miriam McGillis, and learning there about the land. And so that changed my life completely. I was totally illiterate. I was earth illiterate, really. I grew up on Long Island, so most people on Long Island are earth illiterate. We don't know the species. We don't, you know. I mean, I taught children in Brooklyn, and when I asked them, you know, about their experience of water, it was shocking to me one day when I got the answer. I said, now we're not talking about the water, you know, that you just turn the tap and you get the water, but what's your experience, any other experience of water, you know? This was kind of a middle grade school. And the answer came, puddles, puddles. These children live 2 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. That is shocking. But where they live is, because where I was teaching, again, was in a very poor neighborhood. And then there was cement all over. But a child's understanding of water was puddles. This child who lived 2 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. And so when I began to teach them, oh my goodness, I said, you know, we can go down to the ocean, and there are whales in your bioregion. They learned the bioregion, you know, and they were amazed. And I said, and there are all kinds of birds. Because they're when they're going down south, that all the birds pass by here, all these beautiful birds, because the only bird they knew was the pigeon. And so these children, their world was so depleted. so small. Thomas Berry warned us about that with the children. And that's related to their spiritual life. Because we can't have a spiritual life without the earth, without the nature. Thomas would always tell us, if we lived on the moon, our awareness of beauty would be minimal. But we live here on the earth, where we should have this understanding of this beauty of water and animals and creatures. And so we began Homecoming Farm, and when I was at Ground Zero on the West Coast with the Trident submarine, we had a newspaper, and whenever I would write for the newspaper, I was always writing about the theme of home. It was constant in my life at that time. I would write Far From Home, On the Way Home, all these articles. And it was like this theme of home somehow was this cry from within me for a future where there was home. And so we named the farm Homecoming Farm because we were coming home to Long Island, home to the land. And once you come home to the land, you begin to understand seeds because of farming, we were farming. You begin to understand the microbes in the soil, who are the real farmers. Really, the farmer is just like the orchestra leader, the microbes and the soil are where the farmers are, and so it was a place where we could teach the children this beautiful new world, Remember when we said the Trident was the end of the world? What do you do at the end of the world? You begin a new one. And we began to create a new world right there at Homecoming Farm on the property of the Sisters of St. Dominic, our mother house. It was a world where the children would come and in a very short time be able to learn about composting, which I love that lesson. If you've read my book, there are lots of stories about that, and the learning of how to create compost and what compost means. And to the children, it was unbelievable learnings. And that the biggest thing they learned was what Thomas Berry taught. There's no such thing as the human community. There's only the life community, of which the human is a part. They began to learn they were part of a community, but the community was much bigger than the human community. It included the trees and the worms and the bees, the hawk. When they saw the hawk, they saw one day the hawk come down. I was with them to grab up a rabbit and fly away, and they were horrified until I said, well, the hawk is hungry. And don't you eat things that animals? And the hawk is going to eat that rabbit, and the rabbit's going to become part of the hawk, and now the rabbit can fly. And so they began to learn a whole different world on that farm. Just a small little, at that time, the farm was just 3.5 acres, including all the structures on it. Now it's 10 acres, and it's saved in perpetuity. The land is saved where it can't be developed. But it was a place, and we learned, and that's the reason we began the farm. It's so important, the sense of place, to know your place. We don't live in virtual reality. That's where a lot of people are living right now, in virtual reality. It's not really reality. Not where they really live. They ignore where they really live. Many of the children, and they're going on their phones instead, which aren't bad things, but when you don't know, I just heard recently, I think it was just last week, I heard the statistic that they found out that people know 100 corporate images, logos for corporations. They know 100 of them, but only 3 plants, the names of 3 plants. Yeah, well, that's a dangerous direction that our youth are going in. That's why it's important to create these centers where there's land and where the children come to learn that they're part of a whole big community of life. And they love it. Another thing that I taught the children at the farm, so it's such an important lesson, that there's a whole world inside of them that they know nothing about, because everything's just coming at them from the outside. They don't know that they have a world inside that they need to know. And so a very simple exercise was to give them a little blanket to go out on the land by themselves, listen to the birds and the wind, be with the trees, not to be with each other. They had to be alone, without a book, without a radio, without a phone. And I would ask the 6-year-olds, 6 to 8-year-olds, did you ever talk to yourself? Did you ever just sit without anything and talk to yourself or listen to yourself? They had only one little 8-year-old said, yes, sometimes I do that. And if I have a problem, I can get it solved. I said, that's right. So go out there and listen to yourself and the wind. You see, to know that they have an interior life, this is their spirit that they're losing. So all these things are so important for the future to give to children. At the farm, and we were a CSA, so all the families would come and pick up the food every week. It was wonderful to see our mother house be transformed from just lawn, grass, into this wondrous place of diversity, all kinds of vegetables, all kinds of flowers and herbs, and then the butterflies came, and then the birds, and it was a transformation of the land there. The land became, it was open to what it was meant to be, a place of abundance. And here, when I was living with 2 other sisters, and in our house, we were members too, and we'd bring home all the vegetables from the farm. I'd like to read to you something. I didn't write this. I found this at Genesis Farm, and I think it was Larry Edwards, who wrote this piece. Several months ago, I experienced a moment of profound awareness in a very simple act. The day was cold, the kitchen warm and silent. I was alone, enjoying a steaming bowl of vegetarian chili, extremely conscious of its flavors and textures. It occurred to me that this bowl really held rock and soil, minerals and water, and the energy and heat of the stars. all of the ingredients, the beans, onions, garlic, carrots, tomatoes, basil, pepper, and oregano, had once been seeds that I inserted into soil. And now they were all providing me with delight and nourishment. And they would soon become my blood, my bones, my sight, my movement, my thoughts, my prayers. I was overwhelmed by the limitless generosity of the universe and its creator. It was gospel and Eucharist in a sacrament so simple, so holy. My heart brimmed with gratitude. Yeah, I experienced at Homecoming Farm the Eucharist every day. Not in the church. I didn't need the chapel. It was right there. This is the meaning of Eucharist. And we've lost so much by being disconnected from the land. There's so much more to say, so many more stories to tell, but read my book. And especially the children. I think every day now, I think of the children of Gaza. You know, because as I said in the beginning, I contemplate not only the beauty of Homecoming Farm and places like that, but I also contemplate the places of destruction and of evil of Gaza. And I would like to just another piece I wrote, not exactly, I started it as a poem, but it didn't work. So it's just a piece. And I called it A Burst of Color. Montauk Highway is a road on Long Island that many people travel. I travel it every day to go to the Great South Bay, my friend. And one day when I was driving home from the Great South Bay, this is what I wrote after the experience. I could not abruptly stop as I drove along Montauk Highway, and so it was just a fleeting glance, a burst of color. Red, yellow, pink, purple tulips growing by the side of the road. Magnificence crying out to me, begging me to still believe in life amidst the rubble, the violence, the crimes committed against the innocent and life itself. In that fleeting glance and moment of revelation, I witnessed Earth's faithfulness to life. And the tears came. Blood flows through the streets of Gaza. Amidst the devastation, the color red, not pointing to beauty, but to life extinguished. The color of the tulips and the blood-drenched streets of Gaza in one fleeting moment came together, challenging me to not look away, but to see, take in the horror we are capable of, and still believe in beauty and in life. I gave thanks for the tulips and for the one who perhaps long ago planted them alongside the road. And there it is. This is what the universe teaches me, that I need to accept all of life. And I don't need to separate and keep distance from the pain of life, from the ugly, from the destructive. I need to hold it, take it in, and grieve. I think a lot of the anger in our country today is really grief. People don't know how to grieve because we don't want to get close to the reality. We don't want to contemplate that reality, the reality of Gaza. I mean, talk about the Trident and contemplating that. Imagine contemplating Gaza and all that Gaza means and staying with it, holding it, learning from it, and grieving. If everything we love in life is being destroyed, what else would there be to do but grieve? So grief, I think, is a big part of transformation. If we're to be transformed, we're going to have to go through the grief of what's happening, but not like the tulips, not without the beauty. We need both. We're living at a time. You and I have been born for this time. And so we need to hold both of them. We're capable of it. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. And that's what it means to love. Love everything and love everyone. It's hard sometimes, I know, to love the people who are doing things like Gaza. We need to love even those who were making those decisions, because somewhere deep inside of them, I don't know what kind of horror lives in them to be able to bomb daily little children, other human beings. You know, there's also Wendell Berry is one of my favorite people, another mentor. And this is a poem he wrote. In the dark of the moon, in flying snow, in the dead of winter, war spreading, families dying, the world in danger. I walk the rocky hillsides, sowing clover.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeanne, for sharing another really resonant poem and so many really heartfelt reflections, bringing to light both our grief and our experience of great beauty in this human condition.
Yeah.
And so this evening, I think in lieu of breakout rooms, what I'm thinking is maybe we could just spend a minute in contemplative silence to just allow everything that Jeanne has said to really percolate within us. And then maybe in a minute, when we emerge from this silence, we can come together as a collective and folks will have a chance to ask questions or offer comments to Jeanne. So why don't we just take a moment to ground ourselves and just contemplate all that has been shared this evening. Thank you, everybody, for taking a moment of stillness to really absorb so much of the wisdom that Jeanne shared with us. And we'd love to open up the community now to let folks offer questions. So you can feel free to press the react button on the bottom of your Zoom screen and click the raised hand button, or you can type a question or a thought in the chat, which I'm happy to relay to Sister Jeanne. And I know Peter Crohn's had asked Jeanne to share the written text of her first poem, which maybe if she's willing after the program, she can email to me to share, if you'd be willing, Jeanne.
Sure. Which one? Which one was that? Or maybe I could share all of them with you.
Sure. Peter, was there a particular poem that you were hoping to hear? Well, sounds like all of your poems might be of interest, Jeanne.
Okay.
As many as you're
Yes.
willing to grace us with.
Yes, I certainly would.
Great. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions? Claire, love to hear from you. And if you don't mind unmuting yourself, please.
Sorry. Jeanne, I think your point about focusing our contemplation not only on the beautiful, but on the ugly is really, really key. I've not thought of it that way before. But I think until we allow that depth of pain to touch the depths of our beings, we will not be able to be who we need to be at this time.
Yes, because we're all going around with that unconsciously. Perhaps that's why, I find even when I'm driving on the road, you take your life in your hands now in Long Island if you go out driving. People are just obeying no rules. Everyone is going so fast. I think there's an unconscious knowing, and until we make it conscious, and as I said, grieving is a big piece. Yeah. We might be afraid to grieve, but when you think of everything that's happening, I mean, how could you not grieve? And it's not a betrayal of, a lot of folks might think that if I have faith, if I have hope, I shouldn't be feeling grief. No. Grieving is a big piece of transformation. Yeah. So looking at those things, but not without the beauty, not without the other, because that could be dangerous, but just loving all of life, accepting life as it is, not as we would want it to be. That's why a lot of people, because they don't want to look at that place, they escape into alcohol or drugs or, as an escape from the reality. But contemplation is a long, loving look at reality, not escaping from reality. a person who has really helped me also. I forgot, I didn't mention his name. There's so much I'd like to say, but about Teilhard de Chardin, this marvelous Jesuit priest, scientist, and faithful disciple of Jesus, who taught us. He really began, in many ways, this revolution, a theological revolution, where we find God in matter. God is everywhere. God is close. God is in matter. God is in the trees, in the rivers. Some people are now saying it's hard to go to church if church is not mentioning anything about the creation. You know, Native Americans can't worship in a building. They need to be outside. You know, and now there's a big movement toward, as a matter of fact, I think Sam had a wonderful woman that he interviewed who was talking all about this, of the Church of the Wild, church outside, you know, where we're in relationship with all the creatures, you know, so, yeah, so.
Beautiful.
Another big piece is talking to the trees and all the creatures, being intimate with them, learning their language. If we're never in nature, it's very dangerous because there's so much wisdom. That's where wisdom is. So to find a way of every day being in nature somewhere, communicating with others other than human. They help us with our grief, with our joy. Some people do, you know, even how dogs can do that. Help us to laugh, to love, to be present.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeanne. And for that helpful reminder to be in communication with all these more than human beings who are constantly speaking to us if we can learn to listen.
Yeah.
Margaret, we'd love to hear from you next.
I'm Margaret from India,
Oh,
and it's 6:30 a.m. in India, Bombay.
oh,
I'm connected by Marine Wild, and I was particularly interested in listening to you, Jane. After listening to you, what I feel, there is an urgency of moving from a narrow community life to the life of community,
yes,
life of community. It's like whole community. I think in our religious world, we have taken the very narrow meaning of community. It's like my sisters, wowed sisters. But what about the whole world, the whole farms, the animals? They are vowed to live that Christmas joy or that Easter joy or that gospel joy. And they're spreading everywhere. But the world is focusing on the wars like Gaza and all.
mm,
They have forgotten that the community of life is,
yes,
and we have this urgency to move towards that, from the community life to community of life. Thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So, Margaret, it's so wonderful that you bring that out because, you know, our computers help us to do that too. I'm on Zoom
Yes.
all the time, and I think I see Judith. Is that Judith from Australia here? Yes, Judith. Hi, I'm on Zooms all the time with people from all over the world, you know. And, you know, I can't walk very well now. My spine is not so good. But I I go down to the Great South Bay. I can drive there, just a short drive, every day to be with the bay and with the seagulls and the swans and the geese and the sun and beautiful. I can hardly live without going there every day to be there with them all. And then to be on Zoom with people from, as you said, from India, from Australia, from the Philippines, from Germany, from France, all talking about this new understanding of who we are, that we come from the earth, that the universe, we have the powers of the universe, and this whole different consciousness, which, Brian Swim, this great scientist, Brian, who is another wonderful mentor of mine, is doing all the work of trying to articulate what Teilhard de Chardin talked about, the noosphere, creating a mind together with us. It's creating this whole human new understanding together, which will bring unity and love and community, that kind of community and union. So that's happening. I always, if I weren't aware of that, I might get very depressed. If I just watched the news, on TV, I might think that's really what the world is like. But then I go on the computer and I Zoom, just like tonight, with all of you wonderful people. And I Zoom with, and I encourage you all to not give up on this Abbey, to connect next time they have a speaker, because Sam is bringing all these different people together who have these new understandings of who we are. There's a whole transformation taking place, which can bring us a lot of hope. So,
Yes.
in this big community, yeah, it's not just the human community. The United Nations needs to expand into that, and it is beginning, because it's not just the community of nations. It's the community
Community of life.
all of life, right? And we need to be listening to all of life, especially listening to the creatures, to the mountains, to the trees. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeanne.
Thank you for continuing to expand our understanding of beloved community, Jeanne.
Right.
Yes.
We'd love to hear, speaking of the musicality of community, I see Sam and Paula Guarnaccia, who are
Yes, Sam.
wonderful musicians and
Oh,
kindred spirits. We'd love to hear.
yes, the wonderful Sam that you're here with us tonight.
And I'm so thrilled that you alerted us to this wonderful, wonderful time together. And just what you just were saying recently made me think of that Joanne allowed me the wonderful gift of using one of her translations of a Rilke poem, Gravity's Law in the Oratorio, that I've written. And also that Joanna Macy, well, yeah, and she used the term unflinching gaze, which is so important that we, as you said, that we hold all of the terribly difficult. We can't turn away. We must be able to hold both the beautiful and terrible together, because beautiful that can heal and bring us. And then I can't resist also saying that in the same oratorio is a poem by Wendell Berry that's one of the big choral sections, is the Peace of Wild Things, where he says the wild things do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. That's such a beautiful, I mean, we need to have the courage to grieve, but the wild things are again, our bridge to a relationship with all of the living world. So I'm just so thrilled to have been able to hear and all the poems. I can't wait to get all the poems too that you've written. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the poems, and I really believe we can all be poets, because you don't really write the poem. The poem comes through you, really. I find that they just emerge from experience, paying attention to your experience. That's important.
It's the same with the music.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Beautiful.
We'd love
And
to
Teilhard, who has taught us that God is everywhere. Imagine. God is everywhere. The world is full of God. Yeah.
Beautiful reminder, Jeanne. We'd love to hear from Judith next. Yeah, Judith.
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Sam, it's lovely to be in your company and also yours, Jeanne.
Yes.
I've been in your company many times through the Deep Time Network, and I'm just sitting here in the luminosity of that. And just the sense of how life-wide and how life-deep your story is. And it's such an inspiration, and we're all feeling it. But I love this beautiful thing, Sam, that you've picked up on, that I want to pick up on also, this kind of a spirituality of the unflinching gaze. And it's such an invitation for those of us who are living at this time. And it was just so powerfully brought home to me, Jeanne, when you talked about that experience of that glimpse of the red tulip.
Mm.
Way that provoked in you, that sense of what's happening as part of our world, the suffering of the children of Gaza. So holding those two things in tension and having the courage and the kind of poetry of soul not to turn away.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't it powerfully carried also in that lovely poem by Thomas Berry, where he was aware of all of this destruction and violence.
Mm-hmm.
Here he was planting clover.
Mm-hmm.
And I live with this. I live with this in my own life. How do I hold these things together?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of and look with love.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's something that's just resonating for me. And the other thing, of course, is just this beautiful, how prophecy is so married to poetry.
Yes.
And how poetry, really wonderful poetry that stirs and moves us, is so married to prophecy. So I'm sensing all of that. And of course, I love poetry. And the other really powerful kind of spiritual practice that I'm linking into here is your beautiful story of the children who you send out with a blanket. And I'm thinking, what a beautiful spiritual practice for each one of us to go out and sit with a blanket. And this beautiful kind of interior thing to listen to ourselves and to kind of talk to ourselves, but to also know that, to kind of do that in the context of the Sacred Earth community. And, this beautiful image of that little girl who said to you, yes, yes, I know what you're talking about. That's how I solve problems.
Yes.
So there's some really powerful things that are resonating and shimmering for me here today, Jeanne. It's so beautiful to be here with everyone. Thank you.
Well, Judith, this is an example. You and I have never met face to face. We've met only on the computer, on Zooms, and I feel so close to you. I feel like I know you pretty well. And that's the unbelievable thing about technology. It's so wonderful if it is used with this kind of mind.
Yes, yes, indeed. I feel like I know everyone here. I think we all, we're
Yeah.
drawn to these places. We're drawn to these places because they nourish us interiorly. They challenge us. They ask questions of us.
And you may not know it, but I've just signed up for your book study on the Sacred Universe, the book of Thomas Berry. I'm looking forward to it.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
And these are the life-giving things, you know.
Thank you, Jeanne.
Instead of going to the movies, going to these Zooms and being so filled with energy and love, you know. Yeah, to keep loving is the key, I think. Just I always think it's so much nicer and to love than to hate. Why not just love everyone? Love, because that will be the transforming thing. To love everyone, love everything, love life.
Wonderful. Maybe we could hear briefly from Kathleen, if possible, with one last question or thought before we close out.
Thank you, Sister Jeanne. When I was working, when I was studying for my master's in theology at the Loyola University's Institute of Pastoral Studies, I was taking an evening class with a woman who was the head of education for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Chicago, and she said something that rather caught me up fairly short. She said, "Well, you know, we've all studied Lectio Divina, but did you know that there was another Lectio that is co-equal to Lectio Divina?" I never heard such a thing. And so we sort of sat on the edge of our seats, and I woke up a little bit because it was like 8:30 in the evening. It'd been a long day of study and work, full time. And she went on and said that the other Lectio is one that has been known to the church fathers for centuries, and that is Lectio Natura, because creation is the ongoing word of God, the revelation of God, as I understand her from this point of time, over 20 years now. I'm wondering, Sister Jeanne, or any of your community, if you are familiar with this concept of reading the book of nature as something that has been formalized in the teachings of the church fathers, and if so, why has it been lost? Doesn't the church have like an obligation to look after creation? We talk about dominion. And but with dominion comes back to Pope Francis's care of our common home, the domus. So I'm wondering if you know the sort of the aegis of the word Lectio Natura.
Yes, I do. I do know the book of nature, you know, that this is the revelation. I mean, I learned this through Thomas Berry, really. Thomas in the beginning. Now Thomas, I guess I've known Thomas for, I don't know, 30 years, maybe something like that. In the beginning of his teaching, he always said, and it shocked a lot of people. He always said to put the Bible away on the shelf. He said for, I don't know how many years, 20, 30 years. And just read the book of nature, you know. And then, perhaps then you can read the Bible. This has been my experience. I very much, for the last probably 20 years or so, have been reading the book of nature with the help of Thomas Berry and Teilhard de Chardin, and, you know, and trying to really become intimate with the creatures, with the trees, you know. And then going back to the scriptures, I can see it differently. Because if I'm just going from the scripture, I'm not, well, many things are happening. First of all, I'm not up to date with all the science. Because the science, that's another thing. I mean, the science has brought me closer to God. You know, my understanding that God is everywhere and I see God everywhere is because science has taught me that. Science has taught me that through Teilhard, you know. I have become a new identity almost because of what I'm learning, where I came from. You know, that my spine is related to the fish. Without the fish, you know, without all the creatures, they are my ancestors. You know, so it's connecting me with, talk about my theme of home. I now am totally at home. I'm home. Because I've learned that my identity is in the earth. I'm here, I'm not, you know. So yes, it's very missing, and it would take a long time to go through the history of why that happened to the church. Because the church now became a church of doctrine, and it's very patriarchal. There are so many reasons for it, but things are happening. But sometimes you have to say no to things you've learned. The image of Jesus that sometimes is portrayed, or the theology that's being preached. You know, I just say, no, not for me. I find God more in nature, the wisdom there. So, and it's all, and thank God for our Pope Francis, who is the first Pope who came from Latin America. That has a big piece of it. That's a big reason. He went through many political things in Latin America where he lived, which made him different. So, and he comes at a time when we need that voice coming from the church.
I just want to add one more thing that I hope is of hope to all of you, all of us gathered here, and that is, after my graduation from Loyola, and I did go on to become a steward of two natural areas in the Chicago region, and here in the Chicago region there are hundreds, if not thousands, of young people actively involved in restoring nature, removing invasive species, teaching people about the value of nature for its own sake and not just for the sake of its human utility. And a lot of these people are disaffected from the church, as you say, and they have found a greater cathedral.
Yeah.
They've told me out there in the dunes and the woods and the prairies and the wetlands.
Right.
And I teach botany. I teach people the names of the plants. There are people who teach the people the names of the animals. They study
Yeah.
the butterflies and the frogs. It's very exciting, but I feel like, we're leaving the church behind, but we need to gather the church back into us, in some way. It's very frustrating to me as a theologian to see these disconnects.
Yeah. I think if you do some of the reading of Dermot O'Murkel, I don't know if you know him, Dermot O'Murkel,
Mhm.
his new book on ecological spirituality is excellent in showing the progress of how all that happened and where we're going. I remember him saying a young person came to him one day. Now, this is a priest. He's a priest. And said to him, Father, this was years ago. Father, I can't go to church. He was feeling so guilty. And Dermot said to him, go where you find life.
Hmm.
Yeah. Go where there's life. Go where there's life. So some of these, it's the spirituality more than the church that's important. The spirit. And Dermot O'Murkel is, because of his knowledge, his broad knowledge of theology, anthropology, all the different sciences, he's a marvelous writer.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jeanne, again for being with us this evening. I know we're a little bit above our Chronos time, but we could sit here forever in Kairos time. I just
Yeah.
wanted to, again, write in the chat a link to sign up for the Mebkin Abbey Forum for Contemplative Ecology if you'd like to join our email list. It's incredible to see so many new faces gathered from around the world in this growing community this evening. And just wanted to thank Jeanne one more time for gracing us with her lifelong example of wisdom and of activism and of being a living witness for all that is good and hopeful and beautiful in this world. Thank you, Jeanne.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. We
Thank you
will.
to Gabby.
Thank you so much, everybody. We will close the Zoom room, and I'm happy to stay on for a few moments if anybody would like to chat a little bit more. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.